Hey, all you cool cats and kittens. Welcome to the beginning of American history, 1865. Here we go. I'm going to break this up into slightly themed chunks to try to make a series of shorter videos instead of just one long one that would normally cover all of that in like a lecture. So we'll try to break this up. I'm going to talk about the end of the Civil War and what is called Reconstruction, and kind of that first phase that we encounter when we approach the country at this time. So here we go, Reconstruction and Race, and I'm on Satori again. All right. Revisionist history. You can see this clip from Gone with the Wind up here. I'd mentioned this last week. This is a prime example of revisionist history. So, like, just how much we change what the narrative of history was about. It really wasn't about what this movie's about. This movie's a kind of personal love story saga. And on that note of, like, character archetypes and like the character arcs in the story, brilliant. It's great. In terms of history, it's horrible. It's really bad. And the book's even worse than the movie is. But in some ways, I don't know if that could be true, because aren't, movies more powerful in the way that they have image on us? So read. These are the things I want you guys to read through. Look at this. I think I want to do some sort of extra credit opportunity for everybody that involves watching this, and we can discuss it on Zoom or something like that, because it's one of the most important movies made so far. It had a huge impact, and it's still very much affecting the way we see things today. All right, well, this is painting the story of, Scarlett O'Hara, her family, and seeing the Civil War through the lens of, the South, and kind of how it destroyed their way of life. And it paints a very compelling picture that is very one-sided. And this is like what we want to talk about when we're at the, when we're at the point of not wanting to embrace the ideas that are hard to manage, right? Like that we had 4+ million humans in slavery here in America, led by all the Christian leaders. That's incongruent. That is not working for me. So I don't know what to do with that. I don't know how to deal with that. I just want to move on. So we can revise the past so that we can change it and kind of write some of those narratives off. You noticed I like these kind of overview videos, these videos that are like, history of the world in this short time. This one's long, and this class starts after the Civil War, so you do not have to watch this because there's 2 parts to it. But if you watch this, you'll understand a lot about the Civil War and kind of where everybody was landing at the time, and why there was so much tension in the country, and why that only grew after the war was over to some degrees. This is just a GIF I have on here on Satori, looking at slavery and its expansion. By 1860, it's the numbers are staggering, huge. And you can see how the distribution is way less in the North, but it kind of goes almost completely out by 1860, though there are still slaves in the North in certain parts, certain counties. I'm going to kind of skip through some of these because they're in the Satori board for you guys to look at and watch. But this is just some more of the context on the Civil War and how much it changed everything for us. Because this is the first time they used antiseptics in surgery. oh, this is where they're figuring out they should wash their hands when they're sticking them inside of people. That seems like it should be way further in the past than 150 years ago. So pause and reflect on that and go, really? We really didn't know that? And then, okay, all right. Okay, so here we are in Reconstruction, and this is the Civil War has ended. Well, it's ending, right? The Freedmen's Bureau is established, and there's a lot of illustrations you can find online that are just kind of, they're just very derogatory. We'll see a few coming up here that were meant to discredit and instantly cast social, judgment on a whole group of people that are now freed, but are going to be, stigmatized as getting government handouts because they got freed, but they didn't get given any property or anything. So they are literally like destitute. They have no possessions. We could have changed that. We could have chopped up some of that plantation land and given it to all the folks who had worked it for, in some cases, hundreds of years, but we didn't. And when you hear the term radical Republicans, they're the ones that are usually more on this line of like, we need equality and we need to push to secure like stability for people. It's not just enough to free folks and slavery that way. And that's a difference between Abraham Lincoln and like Thaddeus Stevens and some of the more radical Republicans. Lincoln's on quote saying all kinds of things that we consider very morally ambiguous these days, right? Like he said, hey, I'd make the whole country, go slave or otherwise, like if it meant keeping everything together, because he saw that as his job and his first thing to do. And we're like, well, that's not really necessarily like sounding like the great emancipator, but, he was the emancipator. He was a smart guy, and he put the Emancipation Proclamation up right when, as soon as it possibly could, and it kind of solidified what was going to happen after the war, because we like to think of history as written, but if you go back to 1863, the war could have ended earlier. The South could have taken over Washington, D.C. They were within a couple miles at some point. That could have happened. There could have been a settlement. There could have been a split, and we just said goodbye to the Confederacy. All these different things could have happened that would have really changed the course of history afterwards. But what we get is once the Emancipation Proclamation goes out, it's like you can't put a cork back on that bottle. It's just out now, and so it's the bulk majority of everybody, and then that's going to result in further emancipation that goes with the army and the war as it kind of spreads, and then in the wrapping up of the war is the sealing of the deal of the 13th Amendment, and that's where once it's in the Constitution, it's pretty hard to go back on. We can go back on it, but we have to pass another amendment to do that, and this is very, very hard. The only thing we've ever done that to is saying goodbye to alcohol. We did it for like 11 or 12 years, and then we're like, we were mistaken. Let's get another amendment in there and get rid. Let's go back. Let's go back. Lincoln getting shot. Spoiler alert. Everybody knows this. That this tragic moment happens. But what we often don't consider, is maybe as much as we should, is that the nature of his no, I don't want that. The nature of his predecessor, Andrew Johnson, also dramatically shaped the course of American history, because After the war, you have a very malleable country, right? Everything's in movement. Literally, thousands of people are moving all over the country. Black people are trying to leave the South. They don't get out as much as they want. It's only about 10% make it out of the South. But they're moving. They want to be mobile. They want to get away from the lands of oppression. And federal troops that had been, down in the South are now getting business contracts and getting discharged and setting up jobs or meeting a wife, starting a family. Like, okay, we've got new railroad tracks being laid across the country. It's literally in movement. And when things are like that, you can bend them and do more with them than after 4 years of somebody kind of just doing everything in their power to shut down what's happening, to reverse the effects. There is we're going to see what's going to happen with him. Will come out in Congress, and we'll when they go to impeach him, they try to impeach Johnson. I don't want to see this. There we go. He escapes by one vote, and it's a tragedy of history. He most certainly should have been impeached. There was such good justification for it. There just really shouldn't have been any kind of question. And I think that when we failed to impeach him, we failed. Like, I don't think we'll ever actually impeach a president. We would have probably impeached Nixon, but he resigned beforehand, and his successor, Gerald Ford, he immediately pardoned Nixon, even though Nixon wasn't guilty of anything. He hadn't been convicted. He just got pardoned. So we're in a spot now where the president is not accountable to America. There's no recourse for changing that. And I think that it's because we kind of kept failing to exercise power. It shrunk. And so when it would have been easier for the government or kind of, the federal government to institute broader sweeping reforms in this aftermath that we call Reconstruction, this decade, after the war. Like dividing up land and giving that to people that will not do well if they don't have anything. That's just a fact. So what emerges from that is this. It's like a system of kind of ideas on one hand, ideologies, and then sub or quasi-legal ease over here. So this term, black codes, many of you have probably heard of this. It's or Jim Crow law. These are unofficial and official codes, laws, taxes that get put in place to disenfranchise, which means take the vote away from black Southerners. And not just black Southerners, poor people in general, because some of these would disqualified white Southerners too. When they put a literacy, test on voting, and you can't vote if you're not literate. Well, that's like 20 or 30% of white Southerners. They're not going to pass that. So there's these legal means of controlling people, and then they're coupled with these ideologies that write off what would be common sense to anybody. If you take 4 million people and free them, and they have never lived on their own or had the freedom to dictate what they're going to do in their day, and they have no property, they have no assets, they have no security in life, what do you think's going to happen? Well, they'll succeed because we just gave them the best gift of all, freedom. Good old-fashioned American freedom. They'll, and if they don't, that's what America is. It's you get your own, chance. You get to make, punch your own ticket on this. And so this kind of ideology of individualism, right? The rugged individual, the self-made American person. You know, back then, American man, women didn't even count. There was no such, you didn't have a dream. You were, what we'll see, put on a pedestal, this cult of domesticity, as they called it in the 19th century. So if they're, you know, they have, it's a level playing field. They can branch out now and make the same of the world as anybody else. But what we can see is very easy to see. This is not like a debatable thing. Very easy to see for me that because of the starting places we were all at in 1865, and because of things like Andrew Johnson's, you know, presidency and kind of the what will become the big end to Reconstruction in 1876, the election of 1876, and the what they call the corrupt bargain of 77. So those ideologies are like they're there to keep people. It's like a carrot in front of the horse pulling the cart. Like, we'll keep that there, and you won't think about the stick behind you. But if you do stop thinking about that or think that's not going to motivate you to keep going, there's always the stick. So the stick is the KKK, right? That's the terrorism group. That's like, we will. For those of you that persist, for those of you that do learn how to read, for those of you that do climb over that hurdle there and do get the at least a little piece of that American dream, right? We gotta stop that. We don't want you to vote. That sets an example for other people to follow. So we'll just terrorize you into it. We'll burn your churches down and your buildings, and we'll just lynch you guys and hang you until you are back into a subservient state like before this damn war happened. So this film that you see up here is by D.G. Griffith. He was you know, he's one of the like pioneers of Hollywood. I mean, this is one of the first epics, blockbusters, huge film productions ever, 1915. And I think the next year, Intolerance is another one that comes out. So he's like a very pioneering, revolutionary filmmaker. But this film, The Birth of a Nation, is a 3-hour celebration of the Klan as the vigilante, you know, justice, the Batmans of the South. And I mean, really driving home this, you know, this image of freed men, right? Like freed slaves, living parasitically and kind of like leeching off of the state and the you know, the sweat and hard work of the white man. And that the federal government is just these like cronies that want to come around and make that happen because for some reason they want black people to have more stuff than white people. So that's this story. It's one of the most popular films of the decade, and it was on the AFI's top 100, you know, most important films for the first 10 years. I think they took it off when they revised it after 10 years. All right, and then this is a video on Reconstruction here. I'm going to exit this. This is what I was in, and as you can see, you can scan through those things. Reconstruction is going to end in 1876 because, and let me actually navigate over there so we can see that. Should take me down there. Here we go. The government is failing to keep up with the pace and change of a rapidly industrializing country. So the war jump-started people into this new technocratic society, right? Railroads connecting everything, telegraph lines being laid everywhere. all of a sudden the federal government's ballooned up. It's way huger than it used to be. And, America, like the government's just not quick to change with the times usually. I mean, we're seeing that with COVID. Everybody's scrambling on their feet because they're big bureaucracies. So the election of 1876 it's after 2 terms of President Grant, General Grant, Ulysses S. Grant. And he was not the most competent of presidents. He was a military man, and he had a drinking problem, and he just wasn't a highly, efficient or on top of it president. And his cabinet it had a lot of corruption in it. Not necessarily that he participated in, but it was all under his watch. And so the Republicans were not doing great by the time 1876 comes around, and the Democrats win the popular vote. But the Republicans win the Electoral College, and it's this thing that keeps happening over and over again, and it goes to the Supreme Court, which is controlled by a recently appointed conservative. It's like, man, this has happened a few times now in history, in our history. And essentially you have a stalemate where one side wants to sit and go, well, we have the electoral votes and we're going to, put our presidency through on the Republican side. And the Democratic side going, well, we have the popular mandate and we can press it right now because all of a sudden the North is not necessarily so full of people that love the federal government. Maybe you don't have as strong of a hold on everybody as you thought you did. And what they come to is a compromise that they think works, where the Republicans will get to stay in control of the presidency of the White House. But they have to end Reconstruction pretty much immediately. Pull all, any federal troops that were overseeing electoral processes or law and order in places. They got to go. The Northerners that came down to take these government positions that are making sure things are just happening normally, not like doing something shady, just making sure people aren't being taken advantage of. They got to go. So this is like awful. This is just awful for the South. It's awful for black Southerners that are stuck now in these towns and counties and states that can kind of roll back all of the progress that was made. They can try to reinstitute things like, okay, well, there's an amendment, so we can't just reinstitute slavery. Because guess what? If it hadn't passed and we ended the war and put the country back together, states could literally just go, hey, we're going to pass a law that we're legalizing slavery again. Go round them up. Like, that's what the Klan does. They deputize the crowd and go round them up. So we can't do that. So we'll find new means to do that. And so we'll pass laws about vagrancy. So if you don't want to come work here in my field for pennies, and you want to just go off, live off the land, live out in the, the bayou or the swamp or up in the hills, no, we're not going to even allow you to do that. You're going to have to come work the land that you used to work as a tenant farmer now. So you can borrow money to farm. You got no money, so you can't pay rent for the land from these previous slave owners that get to keep their land and their plantations. So they go, it's okay. When the crop comes in at the end of the year, you could pay me out of that. And it's okay. So you do that. And then you go on and you go, well, I don't have any seed. I don't have any tools. Like, I don't have an animal. Well, I got all that. I have a little company store over here. Like, I can sell you all of that and take it out of your crop at the end of the year too. Okay. So you do that and you farm cotton because you don't know what else to farm, or you're farming tobacco or whatever. Usually it's not a crop that you can eat. And so you need food too. And you were just a cotton farmer and you got the scraps of whatever. And so you got to buy some food from the store as well. So by the time the end of the year comes and your crop comes, You find out that, oh, well, during the Civil War, Britain and Europe and everybody that were the biggest buyers of cotton, they all went to all their other colonies like Egypt and India and these other places around the world. And they got them all making cotton that's cheaper for them. And now the global price of cotton is way lower than it was before the war. Uh-oh, my cotton's worth like not even half what I thought it was going to be. Oh, you just finished the year more in debt than you started. You started with that clean slate, but it lasted a minute, like 1 minute, because you had nothing. You had to put yourself in debt to get something. And if you remember back to the beginning of American history, you know, the Mayflower, Jamestown, the first slaves were indentured servants. They were people that indentured themselves. They indebted themselves in order to live or to make it somewhere, do something. And this is essentially what we have now. This is you're indebted, and there's no end in sight, because you could just farm more cotton, but it's just going to get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and you're not going to be able to live sustainably. And so, well, you're just going to be more and more in debt every year, which means this landlord is now essentially my master. I can't do anything. I can't even move. He's got like legal rights over me, and he can at any time say he owes me thousands of dollars. He can't pay him. Put him in debtor's jail. And so, they could put you in jail until you work it off. That's called slavery. That's why we have a thing called the prison industrial complex right now. It started a lot longer before the war on drugs. That's just part of the recent development. It was a means of controlling people. And then, once you got out, again, if you wanted to run away or just you did get out of debt and you want to go do your own thing, we got means to bring you back in. There's no freedom out there to be had. And it's why today the South is the worst part of the country. It's why it's got the worst educational rates and health standards and all kinds of stuff. It's because the system of slavery didn't get dismantled. Some of the very specific horrible ways that was allowed to operate did. Good, bonus, progress, right? But the whole machinery didn't get taken apart. Got kind of close, and then we get this president. And we almost impeached him, but he stayed. And then we got like this kind of non-forward moving, incompetent guy, and it's just big bloated government. And all right, that moment kind of is gone. It sailed on. And that's the tragedy of Reconstruction, is because we can look at it and see all these moments of like hope and where we could have gone a different way, where we could have turned to the left instead of to the right, where we could have brought some emancipation and freedom. But we are where we are. So this is the nutshell of Reconstruction. Obviously, there's a lot of other stuff happening in this time. So that's why I wanted to pause, just talk about that for a moment. We're going to go back up here and talk about in the next video, talk about the Atlantic cable being laid and this new kind of global technological world that people are emerging into. All right, so keep on going to the next one.